All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a huge question today. In a world that's obsessed with information, what do we really value most? We usually think the answer is knowledge, right? Or maybe being super smart. But the source material we're looking at today starts with a quote that just turns that whole idea on its head. So check this out. It's from the writer Sir Walter Scott, and wow, is it a powerful one. He's basically saying, God forbid we start valuing pure knowledge above everything else, because if we do, the world will be in big trouble. He even says he saw more real goodness, truth, honesty, generosity in poor, uneducated people than in the so-called learned folks. That's a pretty wild thought, isn't it? I mean, it really makes you stop and think, what could he have seen to make him say something so blunt? And if knowledge isn't the most important thing, then what is? And that is the core puzzle we're trying to solve here. Our source material puts forward an answer that, believe me, people have been debating for centuries. The idea is that the thing we truly respect, the thing we admire most, isn't what's in our heads, but what's in our hearts. Okay, so how do we even begin to unpack what Sir Walter Scott was getting at? Well, our source gives us this fantastic metaphor to work with. It's all about appearance versus substance, or as it's put right here, polish versus gold. This slide just lays out the whole argument perfectly. On one hand, you've got knowledge, or vidya, and it's described as polish. It's that shiny outer layer that makes something look good, but it's temporary. On the other hand, you've got virtue, sadachar, and that's like pure gold. Gold is valuable all by itself, right? It doesn't matter if it's caked in mud, it's still gold. But that shiny polish on a cheap piece of iron, yeah, it looks good for a bit, but when things get tough, that polish burns right off and you see the worthless metal underneath. So the argument goes that knowledge, at its core, is just a form of power. It's a tool, totally neutral. Think about a knife. In the hands of a skilled chef, that knife helps create an incredible meal. But in the hands of a criminal, it becomes a weapon. See, the knife itself isn't good or evil. What matters is the character of the person holding it. And boy, does this slide drive that point home. But on the dark side, the source points out that, think about it, the most complicated, devastating crimes, they're not usually committed by simple folks. They're often planned by highly educated people. You've got someone with a master's degree figuring out a sophisticated new way to steal. It's a really chilling thought, isn't it? That a brilliant mind without a moral compass can just become a more effective and more dangerous criminal. All right, so the source takes this whole idea of knowledge versus virtue and applies it to a classic epic framework, the battle between gods and demons. So what is the real difference between a god and a demon? Seriously, what do you think it is? Is it about who has more raw power, who's smarter? Well, according to this, the real difference is something else entirely. Let's take a look at this classic matchup, Rama versus Ravana. What's so fascinating is that if you look at the chart, they were pretty much equals in knowledge, intellect, and power. They were both titans. The crucial difference, the thing that separated them, wasn't about their skills. It was about how they used their power. Rama used his for justice and the greater good, while Ravana used his for his own selfish desires. And that one difference, that single choice, decided everything. Victory for one, ruin for the other. And this brings up such a key point. Virtue is magnetic. It draws people in. It inspires true loyalty. Ravana's cruelty was so great that even his own brother left him. Meanwhile, Rama's righteousness brought a whole army of Vanaras to his side, ready to fight for a just cause. It really suggests that true lasting power, it comes from character. And you know what? This isn't just some dusty old idea from mythology. The author argues that if you just look at the grand sweep of human history, you see this same exact pattern play out, again and again and again. Okay, think about the names on this list. Napoleon, Alexander the Great. These were brilliant, powerful leaders. They built massive empires, commanded huge armies, and they shed rivers of blood to do it. They bent the world to their will. But how do we remember them? Do we revere them? The source argues we remember their names, sure, maybe with a little awe, but also with fear. We might respect their power, but we don't exactly admire their character, do we? But then, you look at this list. These are people who also had a massive impact on the world. But they combine their knowledge with a deep sense of virtue. They use their power not to conquer, but for compassion, for enlightenment.
And their legacies? They're not just remembered, they are loved, followed, and revered thousands of years later. Now, here's a wild statistic from the source to really hammer this point home. It claims that throughout history, there have been at least 7,200 one-eyed kings. Never mind all the countless others with two eyes. Just imagine all that power, all those conquests, all that knowledge of how to run a kingdom and wage war.
So, where are they now? Almost all of them, right? Just completely forgotten, tossed into the dustbin of history. And the source argues that this shows a kind of deep collective wisdom that humanity has. Over the long haul, we don't celebrate brute force. We instinctively save our deepest, truest respect, not for mere power, but for character.
Okay, but let's be real. This brings up a pretty common objection, right? Doesn't being virtuous usually mean you end up poor and struggling? Well, the source takes this idea head on by asking us to completely rethink what wealth even means. I just love this reframing. It's adapted from the philosopher Bhartrihari, and it says, true poverty is not a lack of possessions, but an abundance of desire. Think about that. It suggests that being poor isn't about what you don't have, it's about constantly wanting more. The truly rich person is the one who finds contentment, who finds peace. Real wealth is an inside job, not something you can stack up in a vault. So far from being a recipe for failure, the source concludes that virtue, sadachar, is the only real foundation for any kind of lasting success. It argues that all the great works, all the incredible achievements that stand the test of time, they're all built on this solid bedrock of good character, responsible action, and using your talents to help others. And this brings us full circle, right back to that original metaphor of the polish and the gold. A person with a bad character, they might have some temporary success. That polished iron can shine really brightly for a little while, but eventually life tests you. The heat gets turned up, and that thin, shiny layer just burns away, revealing the worthless material underneath. Their downfall isn't a maybe, it's an inevitability. And that really brings us to the ultimate conclusion here. Power fades. Empires crumble. Even knowledge can be lost or become outdated. But the one thing that truly lasts, the one thing that commands real, genuine, lasting respect across generations, is character. So as we wrap this up, our source leaves us with a final thought. A question, really, for every single one of us. We all know that knowledge is power. We all have some kind of knowledge, some kind of power, whether it's big or small. The real question isn't about how much of it you have. It's about how you're using it. Is it just a temporary polish, or is it pure gold?